The large viewing screen on the bridge of the UES Defiant showed the massive space station ahead. Commander John Hayes stood tall, straightening his uniform as the ship approached the Galactic Council headquarters. After decades of searching the stars for other life, humanity had finally made contact. Now, 6 months later, Earth was sending its first diplomatic mission. "Steady approach, Mr. Garcia," Commander Hayes said to his pilot. "Let's make a good first impression." Ambassador Lisa Miller stood beside him, clutching her digital tablet containing Earth's formal request to join the Galactic Council. The small crew watched in awe as alien ships of various designs moved around the gleaming station. The Defiant, Earth's most advanced spacecraft, suddenly felt small and outdated. "We're being hailed, sir," said Communications Officer Pam Reed. "On screen," Hayes replied. A blue-skinned alien appeared on the monitor. His eyes were large and black, and small ridges lined his forehead. "Earth vessel, this is Galactic Council control. Follow the guided path to Docking Bay 17. The meeting chamber was enormous. 12 different alien species sat at a round table, with the Xeraxian representatives clearly commanding the most respect. Their sleek silver suits seemed to flow like liquid metal, and small devices floated around them without any visible means of support. Ambassador Miller stepped forward. "Distinguished members of the Galactic Council, I come representing the United Earth Government. We seek friendship and knowledge exchange with our galactic neighbors." The Xeraxian delegate, who had introduced himself as High Chancellor Varric, leaned forward. "We have reviewed your technology level and societal development. Your species has only recently achieved basic space travel, correct? We've had manned missions within our solar system for over a century," Hayes said proudly, "and the Defiant represents our newest warp technology." A ripple of what sounded like laughter moved through the chamber. "Warp technology," Varric said, not hiding his amusement. "Your ship barely achieves warp factor 2. Our civilian transport vessels are 10 times faster." Miller continued professionally. "While we acknowledge that Earth may not be as technologically advanced as the Xeraxian Empire, we believe we have much to offer the galactic community." "Such as?" another alien delegate asked. "Cultural exchange, scientific cooperation, trade opportunities." Varric interrupted by projecting a hologram in the center of the room. It showed the Defiant's engine schematics. "Your propulsion systems use dilithium crystal matrices. We abandoned those centuries ago. And your weapons systems, photon torpedoes, and phased energy weapons, completely ineffective against modern shielding." Commander Hayes felt his face grow hot. "Our technology serves our needs. Your communication systems still rely on subspace transmissions with encryption algorithms we solved in our equivalent of your Middle Ages," Varric continued. "And your medical technology is equally primitive. Do you still perform physical surgeries?" "Sometimes, yes," Miller admitted. "But the Council cannot admit members who would require constant protection and technological uplift," a small green alien said from across the table. "It would drain resources and provide minimal benefit." For 3 more hours, the Earth delegation tried to make their case, but the Council, led by the Xeraxians, continued to dismiss their achievements and mock their technology. As they walked back to the Defiant, Hayes could barely contain his anger. "They treated us like children." Miller nodded, her face grim. "The Xeraxians were the worst. Did you see how the other species followed their lead? They think because their ships are faster and their weapons are stronger, they're better than us," Hayes said. "They called our technology charmingly obsolete." Back on the bridge, the crew was silent as they prepared to depart. "Set course for Earth, Mr. Garcia," Hayes ordered. "Let's go home and tell them what we found." As the Defiant pulled away from the station, Hayes looked at the stars on the viewing screen. "They might mock our primitive technology now, but they don't understand humans very well. We've always been at our best when others underestimate us." Miller nodded. "They'll learn that lesson eventually." Neither of them knew how soon that day would come. 5 years passed since the humiliating meeting with the Galactic Council. Earth remained isolated from galactic affairs, receiving no further communication from any alien species. Most people went about their lives as if nothing had changed, but the military and scientific community never forgot. Captain Eric Bennett yawned as he stared at the monitor screens in the small observation outpost on Pluto. The remote station was Earth's farthest military installation, built to give early warning of any approach to the solar system. "Another exciting day watching nothing happen," he muttered to himself. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Bobby Chen, brought him a cup of coffee. "Sir, there's something odd on the long-range scanners." Bennett sat up straight. "Show me." Chen pointed to a blip at the edge of their scanning range. It appeared briefly, then vanished. But it was too large to be a natural object. "Could be a sensor glitch," Bennett said, but he didn't believe it. "Run a diagnostic and keep monitoring that sector." 2 days later, the blip returned, this time staying visible for nearly 3 minutes before disappearing. Bennett immediately sent a message to Earth Command. Within hours, Dr. Kate Williams arrived via the emergency transport shuttle. "You're sure it wasn't a malfunction?" she asked, studying the recorded data. "Positive," Bennett replied. "We've seen it 4 times now. Whatever it is, it's big, and it's trying to stay hidden." Dr. Williams nodded grimly. "The movement patterns match Xeraxian stealth ship formations. I recognize them from the data we gathered 5 years ago." "You think they're spying on us?" Chen asked. "I think they're doing reconnaissance," Williams said. "Military reconnaissance." Back on Earth, communications specialist Alan Rodriguez sat in a small, windowless room filled with radio equipment. Much of it was outdated by modern standards, but Rodriguez preferred the older technology. It was reliable and simple. He had been listening to deep space transmissions, a hobby he'd maintained since childhood. Tonight, his old equipment picked up something the newer systems had missed, a faint signal using an unusual frequency. Rodriguez adjusted his dials carefully. The signal grew stronger, and he began recording. The transmission was clearly not human in origin. The pattern was too regular, too precise. He worked through the night, running the signal through various decoding algorithms. By morning, he had partially translated the message. "Cleansing operation. Preparations complete. Earth defenses mapped. Awaiting final authorization." Rodriguez immediately contacted his supervisor, who passed the information up the chain of command. Within hours, Admiral Patricia Clark called an emergency meeting of Earth's Defense Council. The room was tense as she presented the evidence. "Dr. Williams confirms the ships near Pluto are Xeraxian," she said. "And now we have this intercepted transmission. I believe we are facing an imminent invasion." General Peter Miller shook his head. "Why would they attack us? We pose no threat to them." "They mocked our technology," Clark reminded him. "They see us as primitive. In their eyes, we may not deserve to exist." Dr. Williams spoke up. "The Xeraxians are known for their belief in technological supremacy. Species they deem too primitive often disappear from galactic records." "We need to prepare," Clark said firmly. "But we must do it quietly. If they detect a major military buildup, they might accelerate their plans." For the next 3 weeks, Earth began subtle preparations. Civilian defense drills were conducted under the guise of natural disaster preparation. Military personnel were gradually recalled from leave. Scientists worked around the clock, focusing on defensive systems. In his outpost on Pluto, Captain Bennett watched as the sensor readings grew more frequent. The Xeraxian ships were getting bolder, coming closer. "They don't think we can see them," he told Chen. "They believe their technology is too advanced for us to detect." "That's going to be their first mistake," Chen replied. Bennett nodded grimly. "Let's hope it won't be their only one." On Earth, as people went about their daily lives unaware, Admiral Clark studied the defense plans spread across her desk. The Xeraxians were coming, and humanity's survival would depend on how they responded to a technologically superior enemy who had already dismissed them as primitive and unworthy. The sky over New York lit up with brilliant flashes of light. People stopped and pointed upward, some taking videos with their phones. No one panicked at first. Many thought it was a meteor shower or northern lights. They were wrong. On the bridge of Earth's orbital defense station, Commander Susan Lee watched in horror as the massive Xeraxian ships appeared seemingly out of nowhere. One moment the scanner showed empty space. The next there were over 30 warships approaching Earth. How did they get past our early warning systems? She demanded. Captain Bennett's outpost on Pluto sent a warning, her officer replied. But the signal cut off mid-transmission. The outpost is gone. Commander Lee ordered all defense systems activated, but she knew they stood little chance against such advanced ships. The station's largest weapons were like toys compared to the Xeraxian battlecruisers. The alien ships moved with terrifying precision. Their quantum-shielded hulls easily absorbed the defensive fire from Earth's space platforms. Within 20 minutes, half of the orbital defenses were destroyed. On the ground, Major Steve Collins watched the battle from military headquarters. When the first alien dropships began entering the atmosphere, he knew what was coming next. Get all civilians to the shelters, he ordered. Deploy ground units to defend key infrastructure. And someone find Engineer Wright. Samantha Wright was already running toward the research lab when the first explosions hit the city. The ground shook beneath her feet as alien weapons turned buildings to dust. She had been preparing for this day ever since hearing about the Xeraxian encounter 5 years ago. Our regular weapons won't work against their shields, she told the team of engineers who gathered around her. We need to modify everything, quickly. Across the globe, similar scenes played out. Xeraxian troops landed in major cities. Their sleek armor and advanced weapons made Earth's military forces seem primitive by comparison. The aliens moved with machine-like efficiency, securing strategic locations and disabling communication networks. In Washington, D.C., Admiral Clark stood in the emergency command bunker. Reports of defeats came in from around the world. The Xeraxians were unstoppable. We need more time, she insisted. Tell all forces to delay them however possible. We don't need to win battles yet. Just slow them down. On the main view screen, a transmission cut through the emergency broadcasts. A tall, blue-skinned Xeraxian appeared. His black eyes showed no emotion as he spoke. People of Earth, I am High Commander Grax of the Xeraxian Empire. Your planet now belongs to us. Your technology is primitive. Your defenses are inadequate. Your existence as an independent species ends today. The alien's voice was cold and mechanical. You have 48 hours to surrender unconditionally. After that, we will no longer accept survivors. The transmission ended abruptly. In Chicago, Major Collins led a desperate defense against alien troops advancing through the city center. His soldiers fought bravely, but their weapons barely damaged the enemy's armor. Fall back, he ordered as another building collapsed. We can't hold this position. Meanwhile, in her lab, Samantha Wright worked frantically. Parts from old computers and outdated military equipment lay scattered around her. She had a theory that might save them, but needed time to test it. The Xeraxians rely too much on their advanced systems, she explained to her team. Everything they have is integrated, automated, and optimized. But sometimes simpler is better. She held up a modified rifle. It looked crude compared to standard military weapons, but she smiled confidently. They expect us to fight with technology that matches theirs. They're prepared for that, but they're not prepared for us to go backward. As day turned to night, Earth burned. The Xeraxian invasion continued relentlessly. Millions fled their homes. Governments struggled to coordinate a response. The planet's most advanced weapons proved useless against the alien technology. Yet in bunkers and hidden facilities around the world, people like Samantha Wright refused to give up. They had less than 2 days to find a way to fight back. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, a secret meeting took place in an old military bunker that had been built during the Cold War. The facility was simple and outdated, with concrete walls and basic equipment. But right now, it was one of the safest places on Earth. Admiral Clark sat at a metal table with the few military leaders who had escaped the first wave of attacks. Their faces were tired and grim. "We have less than 30 hours before their deadline," she said, "and we cannot surrender." A door opened, and a man in a rumpled lab coat walked in. His hair was messy, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "This is Dr. Kevin Martinez," Admiral Clark told the group. "He leads a classified research project that might be our only hope." Dr. Martinez placed an old laptop on the table. It looked like it was from the early 2000s. "The Xeraxians have taken out most of our advanced systems," he began. "Our modern weapons, communications, and defenses are useless against them. But that's actually good news." The military leaders looked confused. "Good news?" General Harris asked. "How is that good news?" Dr. Martinez smiled. "Because we've been preparing for this since the first contact 5 years ago. Some of us suspected the Xeraxians might return, and not peacefully." He opened the laptop and pressed a few keys. "This computer is not connected to any network. It uses no quantum processors or AI assistants. It's completely analog." "What good is an ancient computer?" someone asked. "The Xeraxians rely on breaking into our systems through quantum infiltration. Their cyber warfare is designed to attack our advanced tech, but they can't hack what isn't there." Martins pointed to the old laptop. "They can't hack this because it's too primitive for their advanced methods." At a military base near Dallas, Lieutenant Olivia Green made an important discovery. She had been studying a captured piece of Xeraxian technology, a small device from a damaged alien ship. While examining it, she noticed something interesting. "All their systems are connected to their neural interfaces," she explained to her team. "The Xeraxians control everything with their minds through these quantum links." She held up the small device. "But these links have a weakness. They're designed to block out advanced signals that might interfere with them. They never considered that old radio waves might be a problem." Meanwhile, in Seattle, a group of computer hackers led by Ryan Peters worked from a basement. The power was out in the city, but they ran their equipment on old gas generators. "Their automated systems are amazing," Ryan told his friends as they examined data stolen from a downed alien ship. "But they're designed to defend against complex attacks. They expect fancy viruses and quantum code." He held up a floppy disk. "Let's try something simpler." Throughout the country, people began to find ways to fight back. They used old technology that the Xeraxians had never considered a threat. Ham radios from the 1960s became the new communication network. Mechanical watches replaced digital ones. Paper maps were used instead of GPS. In her lab, Samantha Wright had finished testing her modified weapons. They were based on old designs but with small changes. The Xeraxians scanned for energy signatures from modern weapons, she explained to Major Collins. "These rifles use mechanical firing mechanisms and basic gunpowder, no electronics at all. Their scanners won't detect them until it's too late." Admiral Clark called the plan Operation Throwback. Across the country, military units began switching to older, simpler weapons and tools. Ancient tanks were pulled from museums. World War I radio equipment was reactivated. Mechanical computing devices replaced digital ones. Dr. Martinez looked at his watch. "An old wind-up model. We have 24 hours to roll this out worldwide. The Xeraxians think they've destroyed our technology, and they have. Our new technology. But humanity has thousands of years of technological development to fall back on." Admiral Clark nodded. "They mocked our primitive tech. Let's show them just how dangerous primitive can be." The Xeraxian command ship hovered above what remained of Chicago. Inside, High Commander Grax received reports from his officers with growing frustration. "What do you mean our sensors cannot locate them?" Grax demanded. "These humans have primitive technology. They should be easy to find." "Sir, we are detecting strange signals. His second-in-command replied, "Old radio waves, mechanical movements, but none of the digital signatures we expected." "Impossible," Grax said. "Their military runs on advanced systems. Find them." But the humans had changed their approach. Across the country, Earth forces began using technology that the Ziraxians had never considered a threat. Outside Denver, a group of soldiers led by Major Collins moved quietly through the forest. They carried rifles modified by Samantha Wright's team. These weapons had no electronic parts, only mechanical components that the alien scanners couldn't detect. "Remember," Collins told his team, "aim for their helmet visors. The rest of their armor is too strong." When they spotted a Ziraxian patrol, Collins gave the signal. The soldiers fired their simple weapons. The bullets weren't special, just old-fashioned lead, but they surprised the aliens who had expected energy weapons. Several Ziraxians fell before they could respond. In the skies above Nevada, Captain Laura Johnson led a squadron of fighter planes. These weren't the newest jets, but older models with minimal electronics. The planes had been stripped down and rebuilt with mechanical controls. They're tracking digital signatures. She reminded her pilots over a basic radio. Stay in the clouds and used visual contact only. The Ziraxian ships were faster and more powerful, but they relied on advanced targeting systems. When Johnson's squadron attacked, flying in unpredictable patterns and using manual targeting, the aliens struggled to respond. "They expect us to fight like them," Johnson said as her bullets hit a Ziraxian engine. "They don't understand human pilots who make decisions on instinct." In his workshop, engineer Daniel White had created something special, a simple electromagnetic pulse device made from parts found in old microwave ovens and car alternators. It wasn't sophisticated, but it worked. "It won't affect our mechanical equipment," he explained to the soldiers, "but it will temporarily disable their advanced weapons." When the devices were detonated near Ziraxian positions, the alien troops suddenly found their weapons and communication systems dead. The confused aliens were unprepared for attacks with bayonets, bows, and simple firearms. Weapons so old they seemed to come from another century. Across the world, people began fighting back using whatever they could find. Farmers used tractors to block alien transports. Old telephone lines were reconnected to create communication networks the Ziraxians couldn't tap into. Children collected information about alien movements and carried messages between resistance groups. In their command centers, the Ziraxians struggled to understand what was happening. Their advanced AI predicted human behavior based on modern warfare tactics, but the humans weren't fighting a modern war. "They are using vacuum tubes for their radios," one Ziraxian officer reported in disbelief. "Technology that was obsolete centuries ago on their own planet." "Their aircraft have no computer guidance," another said. "The pilots are controlling everything manually." High Commander Grax pounded his fist on the control panel. "Impossible. No advanced species abandons their technology in war. It makes no sense." But it was working. Ziraxian casualties were mounting. Their perfect formations were disrupted by unpredictable human attacks. Their superior weapons were useless against enemies they couldn't detect. Admiral Clark watched the reports come in via bicycle messenger to her underground bunker. For the first time since the invasion began, she allowed herself a small smile. "Send word to all commands," she told her staff. "Operation Throwback is working. Continue the counterattack." Somewhere in orbit, Lieutenant Green and her team had managed to broadcast old radio signals at a frequency that interfered with the Ziraxians' neural interfaces. Alien soldiers reported headaches and confusion. Some of their ships began making navigation errors. As the sun set on the third day of the invasion, the Ziraxians had lost their first battles. The primitive humans were fighting back in ways they had never anticipated. 1 week into the invasion, the tide was turning. Admiral Clark stood in the command center, now moved to an old missile silo in Wyoming. Maps covered the walls. Paper maps with pins marking troop positions. No computers, no digital displays. Nothing the Ziraxians could hack. "Our strategy is working," she told the gathered officers. "We're combining limited high-tech with reliable low-tech, and the enemy cannot adapt." Reports from around the world showed the same pattern. Whenever humans used modern weapons, the Xeraxians countered easily. But when they switched to older methods, the aliens struggled to respond. On the outskirts of Boston, Colonel Frank Adams led a force of 300 soldiers. They moved at night, using paper maps and compasses. Their communications were handled by runners and simple code words. Their weapons were a mix of old and new: rifles without electronic scopes, grenades with mechanical timers, and even some swords and crossbows. "The aliens expect us to fight like it's 2025, Adams told his troops. "So we'll fight like it's 1945 instead." When they attacked the Xeraxian base, the aliens were caught completely off guard. Their sensors detected no electronic signatures, no digital communications, no energy weapons charging. By the time they realized humans were near, Adams and his soldiers had already breached their perimeter. In her laboratory, Dr. Kate Williams worked day and night with a team of cryptographers. They had captured a Xeraxian communication device and were trying to break their encryption. "Their codes are incredibly complex," one of the team members said. "Our computers can't crack them." "Then we won't use modern computers," Williams replied. She pointed to a large machine in the corner of the room. It was an old code-breaking computer from the 1980s, modified and rebuilt. "The Xeraxians protect against quantum hacking and AI decryption," she explained. "But they've never encountered old-fashioned brute force methods that no advanced civilization would still use." After 3 days of continuous work, the machine broke through. Suddenly, Earth forces could hear the Xeraxians talking to each other. Their plans, their movements, their weaknesses, all exposed by technology the aliens considered obsolete. In orbit, the Xeraxian fleet was facing problems of its own. The human trick of broadcasting on old radio frequencies was causing more than just interference. The signals were somehow damaging their neural interfaces, forcing many Xeraxian soldiers to disconnect from their systems and operate manually, something they were not trained to do. On his command ship, High Commander Grax faced growing dissent from his officers. "These humans should have surrendered by now," he said, pacing the control room. "Their technology is primitive. Their weapons are simple. How are they defeating our advanced forces?" "Sir," his second-in-command replied carefully, "I believe that is exactly why they are succeeding. They are fighting in ways our tactical systems never anticipated. Our AIs were programmed to counter advanced threats, not sticks and stones." "Then we will adapt," Grax shouted. "Upgrade all systems. Deploy our most advanced weapons. We will overwhelm them with technology so far beyond their understanding that their primitive tricks will be useless." But this was exactly what Admiral Clark had predicted. As the Xeraxians deployed increasingly complex technology, they became more vulnerable to simple disruptions. Engineer Samantha Wright's team had developed small, hand-cranked generators that created localized electromagnetic pulses. These simple devices could disable the aliens' advanced weapons without affecting the humans' mechanical equipment. In cities across America, Europe, and Asia, resistance fighters reclaimed territory. They moved like ghosts, invisible to Xeraxian scanners. They struck quickly and disappeared, using tactics from guerrilla wars throughout human history. The Xeraxians responded by making their systems even more complex, adding layers of protection against human attacks. But with each layer of complexity came new vulnerabilities that humans could exploit. "They're overthinking this," Adams told his troops as they prepared for another mission. "They can't understand that sometimes the simplest solution is the best one." By the end of the second week, Earth had reclaimed nearly 30% of occupied territory. The Xeraxian invasion was stalling, and for the first time, High Commander Grax began to consider the possibility of defeat. 3 weeks after the invasion began, Admiral Patricia Clark stood on the roof of the Pentagon. Much of the building was damaged, but the American flag still flew above it. Around her, the remains of a Xeraxian ship smoldered in the early morning light. It's time for the final push, she told the officers gathered around her. The enemy is confused and divided. Now we combined everything we've learned. The plan was bold but simple. Earth would launch a coordinated global attack using a mix of technologies, from the most advanced weapons they still had to the oldest tools of war. This unpredictable combination had proven impossible for the Xeraxians to counter. Dr. Martinez approached with a small device in his hand. Our teams have finished the signal disruptors. When activated, they'll send out pulses that match the frequency of the Xeraxians' neural networks. And what will that do to them? Clark asked. It won't kill them, Martinez explained, but it will cause their entire command structure to disconnect from their ships and weapons. Everything they have will go offline for about 10 minutes. 10 minutes is all we need, Clark said with determination. The attack began at dawn the next day. All across the world, at exactly the same moment, humans activated the disruptor devices. The effect was immediate. Xeraxian ships stopped in midair. Their weapons went silent. Their communication systems failed. In that brief window, Earth struck back with everything they had. Old tanks fired alongside modern artillery. Soldiers with simple rifles fought next to high-tech drones that had been protected from alien detection. Fighter planes, some modern and some from museums, filled the skies. Captain Laura Johnson led her squadron against the main Xeraxian battleship over Washington, D.C. Half her pilots flew modern jets hidden from Xeraxian detection, while the other half flew older planes that the alien systems ignored as threats. Remember, she told her pilots, they expect patterns, fly unpredictably. The combination proved devastating. The Xeraxians couldn't adapt to both threats simultaneously. Their defenses were either too advanced to stop simple attacks or too simple to stop advanced ones. On the ground, Colonel Adams led the attack on the main Xeraxian base in Colorado. His forces used a mix of modern and ancient tactics: digital jamming alongside smoke signals, sniper rifles alongside bows and arrows. They can't counter what they can't understand, Adams told his soldiers, and they'll never understand humans fighting with both sticks and lasers. On his command ship, High Commander Grax watched in horror as his forces collapsed around him. His officers were in panic. "This is impossible," he said, staring at the battle reports. "No species fights this way. No advanced civilization would use such primitive methods." "That's why they're winning, sir," his second-in-command replied quietly. "They aren't bound by what should be possible. They use whatever works." After 3 hours of continuous assault, the Xeraxian forces began to retreat. Their perfect formations broke apart. Their ships, once synchronized in beautiful patterns, now fled in disorder. Grax gave the order that no Xeraxian commander had given in centuries: full retreat. All forces withdraw from the Earth system immediately. As the alien ships pulled away from Earth, Admiral Clark watched from the command center. The room was silent as they tracked the Xeraxian fleet moving beyond the moon, then Mars, then out of the solar system entirely. "They're gone," someone finally said. "We won." Clark shook her head. "No, this isn't over. Send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them Ambassador Miller is coming to meet with them." 1 month later, Lisa Miller stood once again in the great chamber of the Galactic Council. This time, she was not alone. Behind her stood Admiral Clark, Captain Johnson, Colonel Adams, and representatives from Earth's scientific teams. "Distinguished members of the Council," Miller began, her voice firm. "Earth defeated the Xeraxian invasion force. We are here to claim our rightful place among galactic civilizations." The Council was stunned into silence. No species had ever repelled a Xeraxian attack. "How did you accomplish this?" one of the alien delegates finally asked. Miller smiled. "By embracing both our past and our future. True advancement isn't about abandoning what came before, but understanding when simplicity outperforms complexity." 3 days later, Earth was granted full membership in the Galactic Council. The same species that had once mocked humanity's primitive technology now sought to learn their secrets of technological resilience. As the Earth delegation prepared to return home, Admiral Clark looked out at the stars. "They mocked our primitive technology," she said quietly. "Now they fear it."